It's something that's never been eaten.
It's like Chef Surprise.
It's got buttermilk in it and you'll taste it at any rate.
Awesome.
So there you go. Have at it if you dare.
Thank you, thank you.
I've tried it. I haven't
It's
tried
really
it.
enticing, everything you keep saying about it.
Are we ready? Let's go ahead and get started, council. I want to welcome everybody to the Roy City Council. This is special work session for February 18th, 2025. The time is now 6:25. I want to recognize that we have Councilmember Jackson with us, Councilmember Scadden, Councilmember Wilson, Councilmember Paul, and Councilmember Saxton joining us. The focus of this discussion is going to be the fiscal year 2026 budget preparation. So this is about preparation of the upcoming budget. And you received hopefully a lot of information getting us to this point. I'm going to make just a few comments up front. I'll ask Brittany if she would, after that, to set up some slides. And then, Council, as you're aware, we asked you to consider offering some ideas and input to a series of pillars, we refer to them, relative to building this next budget. So with that, I'm going to open my comment with a question to Matt Wilson. And I want to make sure everybody in the room hears what he's going to say, because it's important that we understand that as we move forward. So my question to the city attorney is, can the mayor, which by the way, the law says the mayor can call a special meeting. For a council to call it, it requires 2 council members, but the mayor can call a special meeting. And can the mayor call a special closed door meeting with the city council to discuss the budget? We okay with that question? And the answer to that question is, Matt?
No.
Okay.
I can expound further if you want, but
Share anything you want to share with this, because we're gonna leverage just a little bit of time on that comment, that answer.
so just under the state code, there's specific items that you can, it's not one of the listed ones. So it has to be either public work session or in a public meeting.
Amen. But let me just tell you, make sure you understand. When I work a budget issue in my federal service, okay, I would never, ever bring employees into that meeting. Sometimes they're brutal. Sometimes they're very pointed, and we're making serious, no kidding decisions that are hard decisions, but we work those at the senior level of the organization. We have no choice, but they're absolutely closed door as we flush out all of the details. And then we as the senior leadership make a decision that says, this is how we press. Then we're unified in that process. But never in public. By the way, I never did interviews to select people for positions in public. But state law is very clear, okay? We have to do everything in public. So as much as I would love to have the city council simply close that door, walk in here, and let's have a serious conversation about the very budget that we're talking about, and do that in private, I can't do that legally. But more importantly, so there's no confusion, is the fact that we have to talk about serious issues is going to bleed out of those meetings, those public meetings, into the workforce. And when we start talking about sensitive information that absolutely impacts employees, people are going to get nervous. You know that. The department heads know that. And the fact is I can't change that. But we cannot not have these meetings. And so however many employees of Roy City may be watching this, how many employees will hear what you tell them tomorrow when they come to work coming out of this meeting? I am telling you, there is no other way to do this. We have to meet in public to meet with this council. And for the record, let me make it clear. If I have 3 of these council members enter into a space that is not necessarily a conference or just a dinner space, I cannot hold a meeting with them. And we cannot talk about city business. And still, if we did that, would violate state law. Now, I don't like any of this, and I don't like to get the details that's coming out, and you're in a real tough spot, department heads, because you're hearing people simply say, your words, not mine, that we're spooking the herd. And that's true. That's why I never, ever did that until I came into this elected position. Because we never spooked the herd, never had to. But for us to have a conversation, we got to do it in public. And I remember many times, and I'll close with this comment, where I'm sitting in a public meeting, and chief, the whole back row back there were nothing but firefighters, standing, listening, and grasping on every word that come out of that meeting. And they've done that to me more and more times than you can count. And they heard the facts. They heard reality, as painful as it is. Now, if you want real pain, and I'm going to do this in public, then you grab those federal employees right now that are basically being issued pink slips coming to work. Because something happened in a closed meeting, and they report to work up there, and the first thing they faced was a pink slip, meaning is they just lost their job. That's what's happening in this country today. They didn't hold that in public, and they're doing things, I'll tell you, they should never have done, but that's not my decision. I was not part of that. But the point I want to suggest to you is we do not talk about sensitive issues like this and not do it in public. So you got to take the hard part and you got to take the worst parts to be able to get to the end of this. And if they care enough about their job, they'll recognize that there's faith in this body that we're going to come up with the right answer when we get to the end of this. I don't know how it's simple to tell it to you. If I was king for the day, it would not be a public meeting. And the employees would never hear a word that I say. But that can't work. It's against the law. So be patient. Let's work through this. Just recognize the fact is you're the conduit to the employees that you've got to calm them when in fact things are talked about that's going to be sensitive. It's your responsibility. Okay, let's walk through the first couple of charts so we make sure we understand where we're starting on this, and then we're going to turn it over to the city council. Council, bottom line would be is that interesting enough, we got a couple of different organizations within the city that are funded. Okay, you knew this. What I didn't realize is when I was basically tapping in and telling you there's a $1.1 million impact for both employee COLAs and merit increases. Reality is there's enough money on the enterprise fund to take care of all those employees on that side, but there's not enough money, in my opinion, unless we get creative, to the $750,000 that's on the general fund side. That's the piece that we're focusing on. So those who are on that side of the equation, and to be honest with you, many employees who are on the administrative side, actually some of them, if not a lot of those, are being paid on the utility side. They're fine. The ones that are not, and Amber, Matt, you need to make sure I'm right with this, is public, obviously the Parks and Recreation are on the general fund side, and all of the public safety are on the general fund side. Virtually, Brandon, most of your people, not all, but most of your people are on the utility side. And Amber, a lot of your people who are doing the administration are on the utility side. So we're focusing a lot of our attention on the general fund, which includes this group. So
You just said public safety. Are you meaning public works side? I think you.
public works basically has a number of people on the utility fund,
Okay,
but the public safety departments, both police, animal services, fire, and EMS
Yeah.
are all under general fund.
okay, yeah.
We okay with that? Next chart. We have to have a couple of assumptions. Although the total financial requirement to pay for all employees' COLA and merit class increase is estimated at 1.1 million, okay? Available funding comes from two sources, general fund, utility fund, I just mentioned that. The utility fund has sufficient funding to pay assigned employees. Amber, are we okay with that statement? Okay, so Brandon, most of your people, it's okay, okay? I think we're good. We just need to deal with the rest of them. It is projected that to cover the employee COLA and merit step increase, the city needs to generate new revenue of $750,000 or cut $750,000 in expenses. Now, we can talk all day long if you want, but I'm a data person. And it is my opinion, unless somebody tells me otherwise, the sales tax revenue coming to Roy City is stabilized. All of the numbers I'm reading, everything I am seeing, okay, indicates that it's stabilized. And for you council members, I shared with you a chart that said prior to December of 2022, you should have seen what appeared to be a year-over-year increase in our sales tax revenue. And the fact of the matter is, it's changed. It changed about December of 2022. And I mentioned to you why that changed. Let me just walk through this and then we'll be done, okay? For consistent purposes, the assumption is employees assigned to the utility fund, which has enough revenue, will receive the same level of COLA and merit. So just because they have the funding, we don't want to separate the groups. We want to be fair and equitable to everybody. Let's just make that assumption. City council may consider not just one of the 5 options outlined in the presentation. You guys have those assignments. You looked at that data, but you may want to consider a combination. That's part of the conversation tonight. All recommendations that come out of this effort must be made permanent going into the future budget cycles. Let me just make this clear, okay? I don't deal with tactical issues easy. Tactical issues simply says, Brandon, I got a broken pipe and I put a team in there and I get that fixed now. We do that probably better than anybody. Anybody. I never, ever, ever worry about whether the police officers are unprofessional, whether the fire departments are basically unprofessional, whether Brandon, your team's going to fix the problems, or whether or not, Michelle, you've got one of the best, okay, parks and stuff. I brag about what Roy City brings to the table. And be honest with you, Amber, okay, nobody manages it better than your team. And you pull the whole crazy thing together, okay? When it comes to tactical, day-to-day challenges, I'm telling you, we get it done and it always get it done right. But the challenge is going to be is what's happening, it's influencing us going forward. And so I think in terms of what's happening in the future, what's going to be tomorrow. And let me just make this clear, okay? So there's no confusion. We get a portion of that sales tax. And I told you the formula in the package is a 50-50 split. And I showed you the charts that coming directly from the tax commission that says we are making good money. The sales going on in Roy City from our stores are doing better year over year, quarter over quarter. And yet our sales tax revenue is flat. And the formula of why it's flat is because our population growth. And if you just take the time to take a peek at the brand new the Kem C. Gardner Institute's policy that talks about population growth, this is what it's going to tell you. And if you want a copy, I have it right here. Utah County last year increased population by 21,000 people. 21,000. 43% of all of the population in the state happened in that one county. And the other 2 counties right behind them was Washington County and Salt Lake County. Do you have any idea how many people actually came new into Weber County? 21,000 to Yukon County. The projections is about 1,500 people. And of those 1,500 people, I don't think any of them come into Roy. So you want to ask, why are we flatlined in terms of our #1 revenue in Roy City, which is revenue by sales tax and use tax, is flatlined? Even though all the indication says people are buying more and more and more in Roy, it's because we're not keeping up with population numbers. Those are the facts. Set aside any emotion of that, that's the facts. And our challenge would be is, how do we then establish a budget going forward that's gonna pay the necessary pay, that's gonna keep us competitive, where our employees will have the money they need and get what they deserve in order for it to work at Roy City. Without, as Chief Williams will say, without us being a training ground for every other district or any other organization around here. And that's true. Hence the reason why this is so important, hence the reason why we need to have an answer. Okay. Charlie. So we ask you, council, if you would break it out. And here's how we ask you to do it. And just give us your ideas, your observations. You talk to a lot of people. We gotta give you a lot of information. We just ask each of you to come up with your own perspective, come up with a conversation, and to be honest with you, give us your thoughts. And with that, I'm gonna stop talking. Okay? So who would like to be first?
I can.
Please, Ann.
I just talked to Matt about this a lot and to Amber. And basically what Amber said, it's kind of hard right now to forecast our revenue because the budgets have just been sent to the heads of the department. So we won't really know till the end of March or 1st of April exactly how much we're gonna have to, raise. If she recommends we never take any money out of the fund balance, general fund, because I'll keep it at 18%. And like we said last year, we keep taking it out every year. We just need to keep that in there because, I brought up, we'd have that money from that land that we sold, that maybe we could use part of that. I hate having to raise the taxes. I feel we have to have a truth in taxation every year. And I liked what Chief Williams had in his presentation about if we have to raise the taxes to do it, tell the citizens like $1.50 per day instead of so much a month. Just sounds cheaper when you bring it to that point. But we're talking with many citizens and family members. They want Roy to stay at the level that we're at now. We don't want to, I've talked to Michelle, I've talked to Brandon. I didn't get a chance to talk to Matt. I just figured you were busy with the legislature, but I know all about your police department. I kind of compared it to how Roy High is run and working there for 16 years. I know there's so many little things. I'm probably getting out of my lane right here, the fund balance. But I think Roy, I like it. I think it's like Roy High. It's a great place to work because of the little perks, because of you get to go to the aquatic center, you get to go, use the Hope Center, all those little things that our principal does, little things like that too, that keeps the morale up of the teachers and like little things that keeps the morale up of our employees here that work here. And I just think that it's too early to project how much money we're going to need, but I feel that we should never take it out of our rainy day fund. We need to keep that for something catastrophic that might happen. And that we need to have a truth in taxation and have a small, as little as we can get by with tax increase in order to keep our employees and happy and keep our city running as well as it is doing now.
Who's next?
That's so.
Fine. No, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I wanted just to go over my different points and questions in regards to the services and employees. So the first question was regard to reduce the operational hours of the complex and or the aquatic center. And after discussion with the department heads, especially Michelle and Travis and Matt in this particular situation, there are so many fixed costs that reducing the operational hours would not really be beneficial if we come to the summary of it. The busiest times of the complex are earlier in the day or later in the day. There's a little bit of a slowdown at maybe noon to 4, but then the staff is very careful to fill that with programs like the county school swim teams come during that slow time, so we're not interrupting and interfering with the public. In the summer, that's when we have our swimming lessons. So the cutting of hours wouldn't be affecting the expenses, it would only cut revenue. And so that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think that they are currently having plans to update pricing scales for all the parks and the rec offerings. And I think that's a really important thing because I think that will actually help increase our revenue. But if we look at that number one question, there really would not be any cost savings to reducing the operational hours, only revenue loss. The second question is full charge to use the city facilities such as Hope Center recreational facilities with no cost reduction for employees or special interest groups except for the senior center and Boys and Girls Club. So after evaluating this data shows that there is an average of 1 to 3 uses per month from staff. And if we charge for that, that would possibly entail a revenue of $25 to $50 per hour because of the way that charge covers staffing. So the most we would possibly save would be $100 to maybe $400 a month. And then the concept comes in that if we cut that benefit, then most likely we wouldn't be using that facility. And so in reality, we really wouldn't be saving any revenue because they wouldn't be using it. We wouldn't, I should say, be making revenue. And so again, there are a lot of fixed costs there at the Hope Center and those recreational facilities. And so if we can have a cost savings of maybe $100 to $200 a month, but a good chance maybe no cost savings, then we need to take a look at what the benefit is. So for example, if we take a look at the Boweries, there were 225 Bowery rentals for 2024. Only 6 of those for the entire year were complimentary because of the benefit. What that means is there would be a cost savings of $150 if we charged staff for that. Again, we can't say that for sure they would make that reservation because there is a good chance that they're using that as a benefit. So I think the summary of this is there's a possible cost savings of $150, but at that level of savings, the benefit of having the benefit for staff far outweighs the possible revenue, which would be sketchy even at this time. So those first 2 questions really don't have a cost savings associated with it. The third question is cut all city-sponsored employee memberships to fitness clubs and magazine subscriptions. I'm sorry, I do have one question for you, Chief Williams, around the corner. I just found that there may be an assistant for payments of EOS through the fire department. Is that still something that's done, or was that only done when the complex was closed? Or
No, we have a budget to put aside, gym memberships that pays for it.
so that may be a possible membership that could possibly be considered, but otherwise there are no magazine, newspaper subscriptions. And I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that until recently, so I don't have actual data for you in that regard. And I didn't forewarn Chief about that question either. The fourth question was no longer pay for ULCT memberships, chamber memberships, all memberships. If we take a look at the cost of that, the membership for ULCT is $25,000 a year. And so we would need to take a look at what those benefits are. The benefits come down to, there are weekly meetings that provide education for our staff and our administration. They allow bulk type of buying options. They allow us resources that save money. And so at this point in time, the benefit outweighs the disadvantage for that $25,000. The Chamber of Commerce is $3,000, and I was unable to come up with a real tangible benefit for that. And I don't know if anyone else has that. I don't, I should have asked you, Mayor. Maybe you know if there's a tangible benefit for that, for the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, I'm in a legislative affairs meeting with the chamber. The Board of Governors, which in fact we address things through the chamber. Those meetings at least once a quarter. And then, we actually have the chamber come out and they, if they're invited, they come into our new businesses and do grand openings. We've had quite a few numbers of those. You caught me cold. If you'd asked me,
I know.
I could give you a big list.
Yeah.
The
thought
strikers,
just
the
came-
Chamber of the Strikers, is that the same thing?
Mhm.
I will say, they do coordinate some kind of bigger trainings for the area that I know the mayor, Matt, and I have attended in the past. I'm not gonna say like they're the most riveting of all meetings, but they do provide a lot of
Okay,
kind of high-level, national and statewide economic news and updates.
okay.
And have you noticed pretty much every mayor in Weaver County attends those meetings with you?
So I was thinking that may be a possible buy, but maybe not, maybe for that amount of money, the benefit we get. The other memberships are around $200 each, but they're professional memberships that are needed for each department to maintain certifications and education requirements. So I don't believe that there's any low-hanging fruit in that particular one. And the lightly bent branch of the chamber may have just bounced right back up, and that may not be a real good option. So, yeah, maybe there won't be a lot of good cost savings for that one as well. If so, maybe 3,000 at max if we don't value that, but it sounds like there's quite a bit of value there. I discussed the Volunteers in Police Service Program, which is the 5th question, with Chief Gwynn. And at one point in time, Roy did have this program, but unfortunately, it kind of fizzled. And the programs actually increase police department demand rather than decreasing the need for officers. Now, there certainly are some benefits, but if you take a look at the benefit cost ratio, at this point in time, first of all, we probably don't have the resource for volunteers at this point. We don't have the extra staffing needed to help that, and the extra funding, we're actually trying to cut funding. So at this point in time, I don't believe it's a workable option. It could maybe be addressed, being reinstated in the future, but that would be if something like budget allows. I got the impression that it might be up to a half to a full person to help support that, but if you totaled up all the help, but would that be a correct?
We would need at least one person to manage it, and then whenever the VIPs are out, we would always have to have an officer able to respond when they find or get tied up in something.
So that instead of saving money may end up costing us 50 to 100,000 or possibly more for that. The 6th question was, all employees hired will start at step 1 regardless of prior experience. So I believe the first item to consider is that the transfer of higher level employees to our city doesn't actually happen very often. So it may be a moot point, but if by chance it happens, these are some discussion items. This system works well for some departments, but has disadvantages for other departments. So I believe we can't make a uniform across the board change, and I believe that change would need to come department by department. And with that being said, if you take a look at the cost savings, I don't believe we would actually save money by starting everyone at step 1, for the fact that the departments where this position transfer works well would save a lot of money for training costs. That can be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 for certain training things, but definitely the additional overtime that would be required for that training. Because if we have a new person come in, they may have to do certain off-campus training. Overtime staff would often have to cover that. And then once they're back into the force, they would need someone to be there with them. And so that actually, if it works in that department, would be helpful. And oftentimes that training is about 4 months. And so that would possibly be overtime savings for about 4 months, and hard to say exactly how much that is, Chief Wynn says, but we definitely know if we take a look at overtime for the public safety employees, that would be an average of $72 an hour if you're doing 1.5 times, because that would be about $48 an hour, $72 for the overtime hour. So that would actually add up quite quickly. So if we could save that cost, by canceling it, it wouldn't save any, but if we could augment or use a transfer, it may actually save money. The 7th question was to cut 5 full-time employee positions. And using that, public safety would be about $100,000 a year, and others would be about $70,000. So I think the questions we need to ask in this is kind of probably where the big pause, the big emphasis, the big concern comes in, where we really need to consider it. The first question, is it better to have fewer employees with higher wages or more employees with lower wages? Because we have a limited, strict amount of budget. And I believe that the only people that know the answer to that really are the directors, each director of that department. What I believe would be the ideal option for this is to decide what the money pot could be for each department, give that amount to the department directors, and allow them to decide, is it better for me to use this pot of money for all of my staff? Is it better for me to cut a few staff and divide it up differently? I believe some of that has already been mentioned with Chief Williams. He has talked about using that option of possibly in decreasing staff so he could have extra funding and budget. And that is something only he will know. For myself or someone else on the city council without that education and day-to-day understanding, I believe that needs to be the role of each department. Some departments might be able to use that money they save and have a better department. Some don't have an option. They are already maxed out on their staffing. So I believe that if a department chooses to cut staff, they should be able to use that money to increase the raise for the rest of the department as long as the wages are justified. All of these changes proposed changes would go through the city manager. Or if they need that all of their staff, then they would just need to balance that out. I believe that the funding should be used in regards to calculating the merit increase and the COLAs for the currently funded positions in each department. And that would be part of that pot of money that would be given to the department. I believe that we certainly know that right now in certain departments, we need a wage correction. And so I think we would have to back into some of that and come up with what the additional funding would be to help with that wage correction. And a portion of that would possibly or likely come from the property tax. Maybe if we have a big surprise to other revenue sources that might be used. But I think the number one key is allowing each department head the ability to tailor those employee positions, whether they cut or not cut, as long as they know what the amount of money is they have to spend. A hiring freeze has been discussed, but I believe it's too hard to predict how that's going to work out. For example, if we have one department that has lower wages, and so we're more of a rotating door, a revolving door for that, they may lose 5 members. And if we freeze that hiring, we might lose all of our 5 spots from one department. And I don't believe that that would be appropriate. We have some positions that there's no redundancy. There's just one. And if that person's gone, so I believe a hire freeze is not the way to solve it, but I do believe our directors are very in tune and they can take that. I believe that the cost savings on that will come through because it would be a redistribution as per the directors. So I feel very strongly that this could be a very good solution for the city. In regards to question number 8, cut all part-time and temporary wage positions from the different departments that were mentioned. Part-time positions are very cost-effective if good employees can be hired, because of course, we can save on a lot of benefits. The biggest concern with part-time employees is paying a basic startup cost for some positions, especially public safety. For example, I know that in the newsletter, Chief Williams said it's like an $8,000 to $10,000 for an ensemble. And so if we have a lot of part-time, it doesn't matter if they're part-time or full-time, they would need to have that basic ensemble. But if we can save benefits from that, and we know that they're committed, if we take and we divide that out, each part-time staff would need to work about 111 hours to make up that $8,000 startup cost. So 111 hours probably would be over a year quite easily. I'm not exactly sure what how often they use it, but with the overtime that they would save, that could also help with that benefit. If a part-time staff is anticipated to work less than this, then there wouldn't be a cost savings. And then maybe it wouldn't be the right place to have a part-time staff. Part-time staff decrease cost benefits, but sometimes they're hard to find. And so that again would have to be a department by department evaluation. One of the things would be, for example, one part-time position was a community development position, has been unfilled. And so that would give us a $32,000 savings that we could put in there. And in regards to public works, they have a very efficient use of dollars. And yeah.
Yes, good to understand that, because you made a comment. The code enforcement person, which the council would not allow to be a full-time position, is a part-time position. You said how much money is being put in the budget to support that?
I believe from the documentation was $32,000
Okay.
from what I had from your information.
So you have $32,000 that we put in the budget. You agree, at least in principle, that if on the right-hand side of the budget line, it's an expense, to be a balanced budget, there has to be a revenue on the other side to be a balanced budget, correct? So if you remove $32,000 from that budget, would that suggest then we don't need $32,000 to find more revenue to pay for that to be a balanced budget?
Well, if we're talking about cutting staff, then
That's just budget.
that would be,
There's
then-
nobody in that position.
but if we
But-
talk
but
about
it's allocated,
positions,
it's
but
not
it's
being spent, yeah.
allocated.
It's allocated.
It's allocated. So if we're talking about those allocated positions, when we talk about how that would be allocated, then that would be at least some money from that staff, from that budget that could be removed and would cause some of that cost savings. So it's the same thing as if you have a position that you could fill but didn't want to fill. This just happened to be that they haven't been able to fill it yet.
It's on the books.
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
Roughly, do we know how many of those we have out there from a part-time positions perspective that are similar to code enforcement? I mean, again, don't want to, you can get back to me if you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple off the top of my head,
That's
yeah.
one.
Mhm.
That's a $32,000. That's a,
And then we have one in legal as well. To where we hired a victim advocate slash risk management. And that full timer now does the job of that full-time and part-time position. So we have not hired that part-time position.
We allocated roughly how much for that? 27,000. Okay.
So I believe that part-time is efficient in some departments, but not any others. Like Public Works, it's almost critical because that way you've got one full-time staff that can manage a crew of seasonal part-time staff, thereby a much more effective use of your resources. In regards to the administration, one of the areas that came to my mind that we could possibly cut would be city council, actually. We actually have more control over our own wages. It's $8,000 a year. And I'm not sure, and I know that not everyone would be up for that. I spoke with Brian about it. He doesn't feel it would be appropriate. And there are certainly pros and cons to that. And so maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to cut all of that benefit and have us as volunteer, but I definitely think we could possibly consider cutting a percentage of it and maybe a percent that we are expecting as a property tax raise. We could maybe use that as a way to consider what we may want to, because if we're expecting everyone else to sacrifice and stuff like that, I certainly think that it would be appropriate for us to consider that. I've heard that some people are not wanting to have a double-digit tax increase, anything less than that. So I'm going to take that at 9.9%, actually. We'll maximize that out. But if we did that as a 9.9% cut in the wages of city council, then that would save us, not a lot, but every bit counts, and that would be about $4,000 that we could save with that. And then when we come to cutting services across, we've got the council contingency fund, which is $23,400. And this provides financial services to different special interests. And although it's nice to have that, I think that we could definitely cut that by 50%, maybe possibly more than that. And then I think, at least right now, we just have to be very cautious about what we're doing. We have very good programs that we have funded. One was recently the Cold War veterans, and we have done other programs in the past. But maybe for a while, speaking of a freeze, we just need to be very careful with that and cut what those options are. Because if we could do a 50%, then that's going to give us over $12,000 that could add to a cut. And if we did more, then we could be even up to a 75% at $17,000. We also have the community fund, and there may be other areas we could possibly cut. We have been very good with Roy High School. We have cut the funding there, but that is at least $7,500 a year to feed the high school students. And so can we possibly fine tune that again? Could we do a different, what's the benefit? Why do we feed the high school students? Is it just so they can get to know us as council and become part of the city? And if that's the case, if that's the number one reason, maybe we can come up with a different way to provide that opportunity for them. Maybe we can interact with him in a different way that doesn't cost $7,500. So that could still be an area for savings. And then as we talk about savings, I also believe that somewhere along the line, we really need to actually start maintenance funds. So now here I am talking about actually increasing our budget. But if we don't look ahead, which is what we're trying to do right now, we're going to get ourselves into more problems. And so even if we can take a little bit of money and start it in some of those funds again for maintenance, we used to have one in Parks and Rec. We've got one in the fire department that maybe we need more. I'm sure that Chief Gwynn has some, but we need to take a look at that and decide where we're at to balance that out. Chief Gwynn mentioned that 75% of his overtime budget has already been used, and that's possibly because that budget is not reflecting properly what that hourly wage is. Now, I don't know that this is the year to do that, but I think we need to be aware of it and we need to be conscious because we need to be planning ahead to decide what we need to do in regards to some of that. Another comment was made on the longevity bonuses. I'm not sure how those are determined, but is that something that we could possibly manipulate? Again, it's kind of a nickel and dime here, but they all add up to something. And I think that one of the principles that, as I have discussed with residents, in addition to our directors, is we want to be, as city council members, we are held accountable to the residents. And we need to be very careful what that is. And so part of that is not raising their taxes or raising their taxes minimally. But on the other hand, we have a very important responsibility to provide first-rate services to them. And we need to make that balance, which is difficult. And I was talking to Brian, I'm not quite sure where that balance even fits, but we have to be very respectful of that. And so part of our responsibility is providing those services at the best cost. Now, I think that a really good goal would be, if we're talking about tax increases, to try to keep it at that 9.9%. Because I think it's a good ceiling to work with, keep it below the double digits. And if we take a look at the figures that Mayor was able to put out into a table, that 9.9% would give us about $500,000 from this table, realizing we won't know for sure what that is until probably April. But then if we could get that at $500,000, then we would have $250,000 that we would need to come up with some cuts of different kinds, whether it's expenses, services. I think we can balance it. And then Mayor also brought a very good point up that if we're keeping 18% as at our rainy day fund, our fund balance, then this current property sale gives us a little overage on that. And so if we could take that overage and maybe use that to jumpstart some of our maintenance funds that we need to, and or if we need to help back it into the 750,000, we could do that. But I do think this is very doable, and I believe it's very doable. And also keep a really high level quality of all of our departments. So that, there are some other things we can discuss as it goes along, but I think that's the summary of my assignment.
Okay, who wants to be next? Randy, you were
Yep.
about ready to talk?
No, let me follow up because I'll just kind of lead off of what you were talking about. Because one of the things that I was tasked with was the longevity bonuses, right? Longevity bonuses, we have 15 people within the city that receive longevity bonuses. And it only comes out to like $7,600 a year. And so these are everybody that have hit the top of their wage scale. And that's just kind of what we're doing there to go through and, you know, just incentivize them to still take and stick around. So from a broad budgetary perspective, it's not a lot. As far as like the, you know, from a percentage perspective, 1% COLA roughly equates over the next like 2 to 3 years, roughly about $180,000 per 1%. So for every 1% in a COLA that we give, it's going to cost us $180,000. So going back to like what Diane was saying with the, you know, 9.9%, if we did a, you know, somewhere between a 2 and a 3%, we're only looking at $540,000. So we would only, just on COLAs alone, we would only be coming up short $40,000 with the 9.9% tax rate. I will say this, the 9.9% feels a little low in terms of what I think we should be looking at, because again, that just addresses like COLAs. And so when we look at it, the thing that we have to look at, and again, the mayor's done a fantastic job of articulating this, our two main sources of revenue are 1, sales tax revenue, or 2, property tax revenue. So let's do what I do when I'm talking to like business owners, and let's back into our actual number. Let's say our number was $1.2 million that we needed to take and actually raise for, you know, all of our costs, okay? So $1.2 million across 12,000 households is $100 property tax increase. Backing into that, from what a typical household would have to spend on an annual basis would come out to roughly, I need to recalculate the math, but I think it's roughly about $2,500 just with how sales tax revenues are actually generated. So what we have to do is frame this to our constituents. It's like, either you need to go out and spend $2,500 more a year of your hard-earned money for us to get to where we need to be from a budget perspective, or what's less, 100 or 2,500. The 100 is absolutely like orders of magnitude less. And again, that's the thing, is that's what we're kind of up against in terms of how we have to go through and frame it. And then on the flip side, again, $100 versus, you know, the 2,500, we're asking them to give us 27 cents a day. 28 cents is what it equates to. Back into it from that perspective, or $2,500 a day, where you have to effectively go through and spend $7 more per day over the course of the year in order for us to go through and balance what we need. Again, I'm just using round numbers just for ease of computing, $1.2 million. So that's what we as a council have to go through and start to more broadly articulate to our constituents, is there's a cost associated with it. I'm to the point in my life, I think I've said this before, I don't mind paying a little bit extra for services if I get good service. We already hear from the constituents that, you know, Roy's not the greatest, but if we continue to do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. And so this is where we have to, again, balance what is in the best interest of our constituents. And that's the thing, is I think full disclosure, we are going into a truth in taxation. What we set the percentage at in order to meet again, this isn't a want, this is a need. Because we as, you know, city council members need to retain good talent. And the only way and the only levers that we have available at our disposal are property tax increases, because I can't go out and force somebody to spend more money into the economy. And so that's kind of what we're up against. I think there's, you know, you still have to go and Brian still has to go.
Yeah.
But I was gonna also like just kind of query staff, I mean, I do like your idea in terms of pushing it back down to like the director level, in terms of you have your pot of money and you can, divvy it out how you see fit. What is, I guess, your guys' perspective in that regard? Is that something that you would be, I mean, I like it. Because again, you basically are the owners of your own business units, and that's just how corporate America works. So I guess if people want government to be run like a business, this is running it like a business because we're pushing the responsibility down into your, different departments. So is that something that you guys would have the appetite to do, or is it something that's desired? Or I guess where do you guys stand?
Well, pretty much you guys are all at your lowest level that you can go right now, aren't you?
But it's not a lower level. It is they get their pot of money and then they say, here's where it's divvied. It's divvied up.
But they can't go any less employees, is what I've heard
But-
from Matt and Darren.
Correct. But that, again, it pushes that decision down to them and it's up to their discretion how they go through and do that. If in order to get wages up to a certain level, do they have to sacrifice a head count? Do they, that's again what I guess I'm saying.
Well, I know, but you saying, but they have to have so many in order
Sure.
to take care of our city
Mhm.
and so many firemen in order to run both the stations. You can only go so low, right, Darren?
So I'm asked to,
I
think
to me, I
I think
interpret that
Ian
question,
was
I'm gonna be
saying-
asked to sacrifice wages, safety.
Right.
Correct.
Because my funded positions are fixed. I don't
Yeah.
have access to another talent pool
Yep.
that I can reduce. I don't have that ability. That's not to say the other department heads don't, but again, I don't have that ability in my department. I can't, I'm sorry, I refuse to accept that has to be
No,
the 1 and 0.
yeah, no.
Like,
I mean, that's the feedback that I'm looking for.
To his point, what I think Randy's saying is to what was discussed by Diane is chief gets his budget.
Right.
How he chooses to hire, buy, whatever he does is his problem. It doesn't impact anybody else. And it's his budget to manage. That's what Diane was saying, and Randy, that's what you're asking.
Correct.
So the question would be is today you got a $6 million budget, chief. Let's say it's 6.5 million. Do you like it the way it is? Or would you prefer, on Randy's comment, would you prefer that the city just simply gives you $6.5 million and you manage however you choose to manage that $6.5 million?
so that particular example, yeah, I'm fine with managing that. But if it came with a string attached, i.e. you're gonna have to cut a person or raise wage, like that's
No.
where I would draw the hard line, right?
Correct. That,
That's the whole principle.
yes.
But I think Diane, when she was also talking about it, she was saying we would provide the city departments with the COLA. We'd provide the city departments with the merit, because that's something that would be very, very difficult unless you have some turnover or something, like I know that Michelle's department had some turnover of very high positions and then hired in at a minimum. So there's quite a savings there. That rotation of employees has to happen in the city because you become like an average year of service in the city. So you would have to have some element of saying, the city will provide you with the COLAs, the city will provide you with the merits. But what I'm hearing from Diane, and Brody has talked about this internally in our departments, the city council will give us the decision to say, hey, I can do away with, this position because so-and-so is doing such a good job, but I'm going to shift that money over to so-and-so. Right now, we would have to go back to city council and go through a process to be able to do that.
So let me,
There's some major advantages to letting the department heads manage what they have and saying, this is your money, now manage it.
right, so I mean, going back to, I'll call Brody out. Community development has a part-time position. We've already allocated 32,000. We can't fill the position. The money's still there. You as the department head could say, okay, my community development people, I'm gonna use that money there for COLAs, for merits, for all of that type of stuff. And that would be your decision as far as how you want to allocate the funds.
No, okay, so I understand that comment. So Matt and Amber, you better be thinking this one through. will this drive, in order for them to manage it effectively, will this drive every department a need to have somebody in finances so they can manage that revenue?
To a certain element, we do have people in the departments that track the budgets.
Okay,
So,
I'm
and we're,
just saying, will it drive then more additional resources necessary to manage it? Because to give you an idea what I'm referring to, there was a time when I was here as first city council member, Amber, your position, when Kathy was in that job, and she was in fact the miser. If I learned one thing about almost every department head at the time, they were concerned with Kathy because Kathy managed everybody's budget. And I'm saying she managed it. If there was going to be an increase or requirement, they had to clear it with Kathy. Now, there's some wisdom to that because the corporate CFO, and Amber, that's you, has to be looking at these expenses across the entire, in this case, the entire corporation. But if I hear what you're saying is and says, okay, chief, you just got $6.5 million out of the budget. Do whatever you want to do. I don't care what you spend it on. You want to spend it on buying vehicles, spend it on buying vehicles. If you want to spend it to pay for all employees, if you want to basically give your people a high COLA or whatever you choose to do, it's your money to spend and you manage it. But by the same token is, if I turn to this chief and his chief goes up and says, wait a minute, I need $5.5 million. And by the way, I've got to get an ambulance ordered next year or this year. And what the cost? $460,000 in his budget. He's got to be factoring in the cost of basically putting money aside to buy that particular asset. And by the way, the 1.9 million or not 1.8 million you're going to need in 10 years to be able to pay for that new ladder truck you're going to have to buy. Somehow, if you transfer the money, he's got to be able to manage that money so that he's got the assets and funds for him to do what he needs to do. And by the way, today, as I see it, we got $32,000 of funds sitting out here on a position that is not being filled. And according to the council, will never be filled because it's a part-time job. And today, we could take that money, Matt, and we could transfer that $32,000 over to the chief here to start to build that because it's in there. I don't see that to be the case now. What I'm hearing from two council members is figure out the budget, transfer it to department heads, and department heads, you manage it. Whatever you choose to do, hire, fire, move people, pay what you want, you manage it. My question to you would be is, do those departments have the resources that they can manage their independent budgets, or are they going to have to ask for additional resources to do that? That's my question.
So I believe, as I was making my thoughts, that there still needs to be a bit of a checks and balances, and that's what the manager system would be for. So instead of, if they were going to increase their wages to a certain amount, it would still have to be reasonable. And that's where the final checks and balances would be going through the manager, because that's where the team approach comes in, I believe. But they have the general principle, certainly. They know the general.
Diane, the problem, ever since I walked into this organization, an elected position as a city council member, I'm going to tell you how it was. Both the Parks and Recreation and Public Works complained over and over again that public safety got more of the benefits in the city than any other department. Over and over, we fought that battle as a council member. Over and over, when I first became mayor, that was the ongoing issue. Always. It was always the most priority requirement was public safety. Every other organization was left in the dust. I'm telling you, if you're going to give that chief $6.5 million to manage it, then let him manage it. Now, ultimately, that budget by law has to come from him. But if you're saying to give that chief that he manages it, then if it doesn't work out, then he's responsible, not you, and certainly not him. Because of my gut feeling is, and this has been the case every year I've been as a mayor, the city manager has to get in there and referee that budget. And when he told you last year to cut $621,000 out, and Michelle, you told us this simply says, I can't get enough money to pay for fertilizer. Or the chief one that says, I don't have enough bullet money to be able to train my people. The fact of the matter is, that's the budget that came to you to approve. It wasn't something we did. It's something that came to you because that man had to basically drop 7.4% out of that budget. He did that. And I got a feeling is it didn't go easy. And knowing the department heads and reading your document, I can't help to think that, to be honest with you, they probably put a lot of pressure on the city manager and say, you got to be out of your mind. Fertilizer, Michelle, that's out of our mind. The bottom line to this problem is, here's what I think you're talking about. You're taking a heavy load off that man and simply says, here's what I'm going to do in this budget. I'm going to give that man right there $6.5 million, and chief, whatever you choose to do with it, as long as it's within the framework of the law and the ordinances, go at it. And if you don't have enough money to pay for your people's COLA, that's your problem, not my problem. And it certainly won't be his problem. But the question you have to ask is that kind of stewardship you want? Because that's what I just heard two council members, and all we need is a third one to agree to that. And that becomes the law of the land. The question that Randy asked you, and you need to think about this, is are you willing to take on that responsibility? Because 3 votes can make that happen tomorrow. 3 votes.
No, the money's the money. I mean, it doesn't matter if we can control it. If you don't give us enough money, we can't, it doesn't matter. We can move money that way now.
What's enough
The
money?
bottom line is, that
What's
you
enough
don't,
money?
that's my point, though.
What's enough money? Give me, chief, tell me what enough money is. Is enough money simply says you need how much more? Is the property tax increase that Randy is talking about, is it going to be 9.9 or 39.9?
That's not my decision. What I'm trying to say, that's not my decision of what the council does and how it's to increase the taxes. I'm telling you, we need to be put in the market, so we're competitive. That's my message here.
You haven't, but we haven't even got to that conversation.
I'm just saying, but it doesn't matter what money is given to us to manage. If you give us,
Well,
if you
assume
give us
it's
less,
enough. Assume it's enough. Is
So-
that enough?
Mayor, I think what he's saying, like, yes, you give us the money to manage the budget. If you don't give us enough money, is the onus really on the department heads? I made a decision today, whether it's long life radio batteries, so radio battery makes it a shift, or ammunition.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Okay.
That was the money I was given. I didn't get to make that decision.
Who made it for you?
That was based on the budget year.
Okay, so.
And so-
What I'm saying is, so what's the right number? Because the chief may go up there and simply says to make this work, what the chief needs is, he needs a 35% property tax increase because here's what he's got to buy, which is not in this conversation. He's got to buy an ambulance. And if you don't start setting the budget in place now, chief, and by the way, as you well know, you pay for it in 2025, and when is it delivered? 2027? The bottom line is we should be buying another ambulance now. That's a $500,000 bill and that's a 12% property tax increase. His need is in fact to be able to come up with at least, I'm just gonna put the number out there, chief. You need a 35 to 40% property tax increase for you to be able to do what you want to do and need to do. You need to keep the people you've got. You're not asking for a 35% property tax increase. You're probably going to be asking for a typical 12 or 14. I think the budget right now we're looking at will more likely come at about 17%. All I'm saying is that the responsibility of defining what you're going to need has to be, and it's a city council has to fund it. That's it. And all I'm saying to you would be is, Randy asked you, would you prefer to manage your own money?
I would prefer to manage my own money, yes, but it has to be enough.
What's enough?
We presented what we thought was enough last year and got told that we had to cut. That's the problem.
Bingo.
And so we didn't get what we thought was going to be enough.
we submit that every year, what we need.
Exactly.
And then it gets cut or we have to
Every
adjust.
time. And every time that happens, chiefs, let me tell you, and this is what I get every time I've gone through this process, is the fact is public safety gets the bulk of it because it's considered to be mission central and all the other departments don't. And when I had your department head, Travis, tell us, I could not get the liner, enough money to pay a liner for that pool because the money that was needed had to go to public safety, then I'm saying to you is hence the problem. To me, maybe there's wisdom in this conversation. Simply, here's your budget. Screw it up, you screw up your people. Work it, you do some great things. And we provide the service we not. But that young lady in the corner out there cannot be the scapegoat on this process because she has some needs.
Can I ask
And
a
the bottom
question?
line is, my concern going to be is, as it sits right now, this is all about priority. So if your comment's going to be, chief, it simply says, here's what I need. I need this amount of money. I want to pay my people this amount. I need money for an ambulance now. And in 5 years, I want to start putting enough money out there to buy that new pumper that I'm indicating to you. You lay that out and you tell the city council, this is the amount of money I need now. Now, how they choose to come up with it is up to them. If they choose, or if they basically says, no way, then your conversation would be, is I got $5 million, then you figure out exactly how you're going to cut it. And it's your problem.
Can I ask a question? I'm curious why Michelle or any of the public works or anybody feels that we make ourselves more important to them. That's not anything that I've said or the police chief has said.
Before you got here, it was never that way.
But what I'm saying is, that's not something I advocate for. I don't feel, but that's how you're pitching it.
Well, it is, I stood in front of the city council meeting. I had your counterpart walk into that meeting. We were at the budget decision and he walked in there and he told the city council, I need a pay raise for my employees, and he got it.
Again,
That man over there and me were just so disheartened
Oh, I-
because here was the council ready to sign this budget and your counterpart before you, I'm not blaming you. But I'm telling you, chief, I had your counterpart before you walked in there, walked into the meeting. It was in December. Before we even got to the budget, says, hey, I'm in crisis. I just lost another 4 or 5 people, whatever that was, and I need a salary increase. That was a mid-year increase, in which case we did. The council approved that. I'm just telling you, this is the reality. It's not you personally, it's the reality. And if you don't think, chief, that the fact is the people that work in the organization don't see that there's some priorities taking place there, some incentives going on to public safety over them, then please don't be blind to that. My biggest frustration is that I went up there and basically had to sit down with the city council. First 2 city council meetings we're dealing with budgets. And what we did is we took the city manager out of the conversation. It says, get out of the room. And we sat down with every department head right in this room in here, and we talked about what do you need? Because what was happening, chief, and you may not like this, is because the chief would walk up there and tell the city council members, say, wait a minute, I asked for this. I wanted this. We never heard that. He said, got to the city manager, and the city manager went up there and simply says, I had to basically set the priorities. And he decided that. So what you asked for never made it to the city council. So we took the city manager out of the conversation, sit down one-on-one for about half an hour to an hour, and we asked every department head, what do you need? What do you want? And we set the budget based on what you said, not what his counterpart said. I'm just telling you how it is. So this is not personal, chief. I'm just telling you that the perception has been public safety is number 1. Everybody else is number 2. And that's the reality. We like it or not, that's how it is.
Well, if I may, I understand that's been the perception, and for some reason, we keep facilitating it and allowing that to continue to be the perception instead of working on messaging, instead of trying to dismantle that stigma. Here you are talking to us about our predecessors.
Mhm.
They're not here anymore. I have been working to try and break down that stigma. I have worked with my command staff, I've worked with my line staff, and I'm not aware of any friction that's going on at the street level. I'm not saying that it's not occurring, but I'm not aware of it.
Which is one of the reasons why, chief, the issue has to be is we have to make sure. I sit down with Dave and I, which we agreed on very few things as city council members. And he turned to me and he said, Bob, he says, what we do here now as a city council members needs to make sure we're fair to everybody. And we made a decision then that simply says, we were not going to go out there and specialize one group over the other. And that was painful. Because what it means was, we weren't gonna go out there and single out the police officers to get their increase in pay and not make sure the administration got the same thing. And I'm telling you, that's how it was.
Well, for me, this is an issue of fairness. This is an economical question. It is absolutely an economical question.
So what's the right answer?
Each position is valued differently in the market. And so what we're asking for is market average in all the departments. I don't know what that number is, but that's all we're asking for is market average for their employees in their departments. Now, the one thing that I don't have that fire has, or that Public Works has, or Recreation has, the state has been unequivocally clear. Police departments aren't going to be revenue generators. I am sorry that public safety is the most expensive line item, but I have no way of generating revenue to offset those costs. The costs are what they are, and we're either willing to pay them or we're not.
I'm not saying there's not that. I'm just saying is we have to find a way by which it's balanced.
That may not be what you're
saying.
saying, but that's the message that's being received.
Well, of course it is, because it's the reality. I still had your people go up there and tell me, we don't call that Hope Center, the Hope Center, we call it the Merit Center. That was a 2013, when in fact the decision was made, and there wasn't a person probably here at that time, went up there and said, the money that it should have paid for the employees went to pay for that Hope Center. They still bring that crap back up. I had one of your captains walk into a city council meeting and basically accused us of a lot of stuff, as he was trying to make it clear, okay, that we should in fact make sure we take care of the police officers. Now, I didn't take it personal. He certainly had a right as a public citizen to make a comment, doesn't live in our city, but he certainly didn't hesitate to make sure he made his point clear to me. And he accused everybody except Randy, in which case he said, Randy, you're one of the good guys. The rest of us weren't so good. I'm just telling you, Chief, we need to change that. I'm asking you, and Randy asked you, if in fact he says you should have full control over your budget. And if the answer to that question is yes, then I'm asking Amber, what is the impact of that? That's simple.
I would be fine managing my budget, but the budget, and I don't know what enough is right now, we're still working on that.
Okay.
But if the floor is X, right? And then that all of a sudden becomes the ceiling, and I don't have enough money to manage the department, then it doesn't matter at that point how much money I'm given. I can't manage it. And then if for some reason there's something that happens, it must be my fault because I didn't manage the budget when we weren't given what we asked for. So, I mean, it's not just a department head. The city council is the policymaker.
The roles.
Right? And so all I can do is manage the budget I'm given. But just because there's a failure doesn't mean the failure is on the department head specifically.
Then I would say to you, Diane, your recommendation makes no sense. Because the way I would approach that, I would simply says, if I gave that man and that chief the budget, he manages it. If he fails it, he fails it, and it's his responsibility.
So what I hear you saying is you would prefer to be the one that chooses all of the cuts. If an employee is cut, you would prefer to be the one that chooses the cuts? Is that what I hear you saying?
No, what I'm
You wanna
saying
pick
would
and
be is
choose?
that I'm saying would be is your recommendation, and Randy was asking the question would be is, I kind of like the idea that simply says, I'll carve out a piece of the budget,
Mhm.
$6.5 million goes to police officer. He gets that budget. He hires, fires, buys things on his budget.
Uh-huh.
It's not an infinite budget. It is a budget. And the success of that budget execution is him, not him.
And so the problem with him being in charge, because he knows the nuances, because he knows where the
Yeah.
ins and outs go. So the problem with him being in charge of it is, I'm not sure where that problem is.
The only problem would be is, his comment would be is, it's not gonna be enough. And as long as city council gets him what is enough, he should not have a problem. What I'm saying is, when you go up there and make a recommendation to turn the responsibility of the budget over to the department heads, they are accountable. Today, the law says he's accountable.
Right. Well, and you kind of articulated it really well as far as like overtime budgets, right? And you've actually articulated that as well. We had the officer involved shooting. We had how many of our officers were out on paid administrative leave. Plus we had to turn around and bring in, already stretched resources. And I imagine we were probably hitting the overtime budget with them. So that's completely and totally blown things out. So to like Chief Gwen's concern, there's variability in what can possibly happen. And that's the thing, is there would have to be a mechanism in my mind where we go, okay, yes, there has been, you know, some extenuating circumstance where we have to give him some type of relief for stuff that's 100% out of our control, which I would argue that's where the general fund balance comes into play. It would still be at our discretion. Exactly. This goes into, I've always given the notion of, if a street blows, if we have like a gas main blow up and it takes out an entire, you know, city street, that's what the emergency fund is for. That's what we would take and have to, I think, to make you comfortable, there would have to be some mechanism where you could say, hey, look, I blew my overtime budget out because of this particular event, help. And we would have to step in and facilitate that.
Who's gonna step in?
We're a team.
Correct.
right?
Who steps in?
Well, I think that's why we have a manager that helps with the team.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't have your own individual responsibilities
Right.
because you know the ins and outs of that area. You're the one that is best tailored to do that. But then you have someone like a manager that can help balance that and run that by and say, okay, yep, that sounds like a great plan. And then you move forward, but you're moving forward with someone who has got the expertise, the wisdom and the experience to make the choices as good as possible for that moment. And that's where I
Diana,
think it's so important.
I agree with you. Here's what I'm saying to you.
Uh-huh.
You know why it works well today? Because the city manager is ultimately responsible. Because you've got $32,000 of money that's been budgeted in the community development area. And if that chief comes in some $32,000, he can move that money to him. And all it requires is Amber to go up there and make a notification on that monthly document. He's responsible. He can manage it. But if Michelle goes up there and simply says, I got a little extra money, but we've given her the authority to simply make a decision based on her budget, and she manages to the budget. Are you willing to go in and ask Michelle to simply says, I don't want you to do this when I'm going to take the money from you? And I'm going to give it to the chief?
Well, I believe that that's where the manager comes in. I don't know, is that a reasonable approach is the way I'm trying to describe it? We're all of these directors are working as a team. And because they're all very conscientious and they're very responsible, they are going to do what's best for their department individually, but also for the city. They all want to help the city as a whole. That's part of it. And that's where you can help across, and that's why you have department head meetings. Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain level that councils have to be involved by statute.
Right.
So when he has $30,000 that we're not using, he and I have the discretion to use it within that budget right now, within balance. I can't raise pay scales. We just adopted a new policy saying that, under certain circumstances, we can raise an employee's wages to a certain limit. We adopted that in council. I do not have the authority to give that to anybody else. That is a council's authority. We have to do a budget adjustment to move money from one department to another. So there are certain checks and balances that by statute has to be the council.
Okay, and that's what we want.
From what I'm hearing you're saying is it would give department heads more of a discretion, because when we're talking about cutting staff, I don't want to pick on Chief Williams, but he talked about, if we get rid of 2 full-time employees, it would allow us to give these to the monies to the rest of the individual. I think what you're saying is that is what, as a council member, I don't want to pick and choose what departments are losing employees, but if a department is wanting to fix the wages because it's more detrimental to not have any employees because of low wages than to do without 2 employees, I can reallocate that to the department and it will be their choice to do that. Right now, I don't feel comfortable saying we have that full discretion, though. I think that would be much more of a city council decision than us being, when we have a budget, we allocate those monies to particular employees. I cannot hire more employees. I don't have the authority to say, I'm going to go hire another police officer because we have extra money sitting around.
Right.
I cannot reallocate his money and the legal money to allocate that over to the police department. I don't have that authority. That has to
But
be the
if he
city
had
council.
$6 million to do what he wanted with that money, that would be to hire people to buy police cars or whatever, but if something catastrophic happened, and we had like a mass shooting or just something bad where all your car's gotten a wreck on the freeway or something where we'd have to help him out if he didn't have enough money. But he could always come to you, show you his budget. And you could help him, since you have the brains and all the numbers, to help him out with that. Do you think that would be something that could work for each department head to be in charge of their own budget like that?
I think it sounds really good, but I think from the perspective of the chiefs, what they're saying is they don't simply have the money to do it. And when the mayor's talking about me cutting it, it's because I can't grow money. When
Yeah,
I'm
we
having
have to make sure it was, you know, the money that you need, which we won't even know till April, what your budget is gonna be. And then we'd have to see what each budget is, and then whether we had to raise taxes or whatever we had to do to make that budget work. But if
But-
we
but
did
to-
make that work, would you,
But Ann, let me ask you this question. Are you willing to give the chief the authority to simply says, today I've got 28 people. I need 30 people. I have enough money in the budget to hire 2 more people. Can he go out and hire the 2 more people he wants without your approval?
doesn't,
I,
By statute, you would have to have city council's approval on something like that.
okay,
Are you willing to give it to him? For him to manage his budget, hire the people, fire the people, buy the cars, buy the ammunition. Are you willing to give the department head the authority to make all of those day-to-day necessary decisions? So they don't have to come back to the city council for Mother May I?
I'd have to get more information on it before I can make that decision. I'd have to talk with Matt and Amber and Brody.
That's what Randy and Diane are saying.
Yes.
Well, if we're talking about pay for performance, I'm not opposed to pay for performance, but if we're coming in saying we need $7 million for this budget, and I get 6.5 million.
Okay.
That wasn't a decision I got to make, but that somehow some failure to manage my agency now falls on me.
Mhm.
Like, I don't, that causation and correlation are not the same, right? And so, like, that could be argued either way. Right? One could blame me for the failure because I didn't manage the budget, or the inverse would be, well, the policymakers could be blamed because they didn't fund it enough. Like, neither the policymakers nor the department heads get to abdicate responsibility, is what I'm saying.
I
Right,
don't think it solves the problem.
yeah.
It's just how you manage the money. The problem is the revenue and the wages and keeping employees. We're here for retention.
Chief, I said that from the very beginning. You're flatlined.
Yeah.
We don't have revenue coming into this city. I'm asking the question, where do we get that? Is it a 50% property tax this year? And if it is, it's 50% next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, because there's nothing on any horizon that's going to bring more revenue in the city. Nothing. In fact, quote me on this one and you can watch it unfold, okay? Whoever's got the raised property taxes. This year, they'll break ground on that Walmart in West Haven. If Sherry gets her way and she gets that Smith's Supermarket down there in Hooper,
She said no.
they're going to pull a lot of the monies that we get today in revenue buying groceries in our city are gonna go into West Haven and they're gonna go into Hooper. Trust me with that comment. And that's gonna mean that our revenue that we get, the revenue we're getting now, this flat line, will start to dip. It's not coming into Roy. The only choice the city council has, and it comes down to this, cut people or raise taxes, or both.
Or services.
Yeah, cut services. And if you go up there and said this, and every department head said the same thing, and I read Dan's note, that if I could lose 2 people and get the pay where you're competitive, you'd seriously think about that. What happens if we give you the money to make that decision? You decide that, not me, not the council, not the city manager. You decide that. Because what I heard from Randy and what I heard from this young lady was, you simply give it to the chief. He knows what the crap he's doing. And if he goes up and says, I got this money here, And if I can take two people out and I can now raise every one of your firemen, every one of your paramedics to be competitive so you can keep them, would you like to have that choice? And
I'm
that
proposing
decision?
now.
Bingo. That's what's on the table, because today you've got to clear it from him and he's got to clear it from the council. What I
But
think
the
I
ceiling's
heard,
the ceiling. I've already said, I mean, the ceiling's the ceiling.
council's going to come into this conversation and it's going to basically say, chief, and I think it's equally agreed. If it is the decision of the council to make a modest increase in property tax increase, it will happen. And it's going to be interesting in an election year. But the
It's
point I
gonna be
want to
interesting
suggest to
if they
you,
cut a lot of employees at Hillfield too, gonna affect all the cities around here.
bottom line's going to be is, if you're gonna listen to what I heard here, it's saying is, they'll give you that choice. You want that choice. And if you get 3 votes, you have that choice. And then you decide.
So what's your concern about them having a choice?
Is because I asked Amber the same question. How much resources is she going to have to be able to help manage that? Because their choice, is she going, because she's the financial people, she's the one that, will it require these departments to have people to be able to help them manage that? Because I don't expect these people to be accountants, but they're gonna have to manage like an accountant.
But she would be managing it one way or the other, right? She's just that she'd be
Only
helping
today,
focus.
because it's administrative.
Or
But I am telling you,
someone's
Diane,
gonna
trust
have
me with
to
this
manage
comment.
it.
Before she came here, the person who was in that position, she ran this city.
Okay, so it
They
has to
already
be,
managed, like he
right,
says,
I mean,
their department and they know how much.
She
each-
doesn't
Yeah.
manage unless it's approved by you.
Correct. The amount.
The amount, right,
I
but,
go through line items.
Yeah.
right.
But if he wants to go out and hire somebody, Ann, and says, man, I'll tell you what, I've got to raise my people's pay. And I'm willing to give up a body, and if it gives me an extra $100,000, and you can take that $100,000 and now give his people an extra $5 or $10 an hour, and you give him that authority, I got a gut feeling he would take that and run with
Well,
that.
you're short 2 firemen right now. You've never rehired 2 that you lost, right?
Let him take the money and let him pay his employees. He'll not lose another fireman out of this city.
If he has the right amount of money to begin with.
But the reason why we don't hire the 2 is because we're trying to get the wages to keep the people. It's
Right.
retention.
Right.
It's a catch 22.
That's the whole point. So you
Yes.
have the authority to do that. Is that what you want? Because it's a two-way street. As this city manager says, it's gonna basically says agree to it. City council authorizing it, and what the city council will do in that authorization, if I heard Randy's comment and Diane's comment would be is they will give up the responsibility to tell you how to hire your people.
Well, obviously, we have to wait till we get the budget and they turn in all their budgets, right, in April, and then we saw what all the budgets are and how much money we'd have, obviously, and then we would have to bring this up at a council meeting
It's gonna come up. May
Right.
1st, you will get the budget.
and
But
so
let me just make sure you understand. Ann.
yeah.
Chief made a comment, and I've seen this every year I've been here. He will come in his requirements, and the city manager will cut those requirements. Right?
Well, depends.
They don't do it because he has nothing better to do. He's trying to stay under that budget. What happens if the city manager doesn't cut his requirements? And the chief is fully responsible for all of his needs. Then the issue, Ann, is coming up is you've got to give him the money.
So you don't agree with it, obviously.
No, all I'm saying is I'm asking the other harder question that didn't get asked. What kind of resources would these department heads need to be able to do what was recommended by Randy and Diane?
How much overhead are we talking?
It's,
It's a loaded question.
Well, and any cut that was made last year is gonna be back in this budget.
Correct.
And I made an agreement that if we fix salary, I would eat that for another year.
Yep.
If this ends up going in this direction, I'm gonna be asking for all that money back plus salary.
Yep.
Because that's what we need.
Yep. And that was $621,000.
Well,
okay, well, I guess
I
if,
think one thing you gotta consider is all this goes to the employees. That's who it affects.
right.
And we're here to speak and retain employees. We gotta remember that, like,
Disagree.
Right, but that's, I think it's being forgotten. I mean,
No,
we
no.
make these decisions.
I
It's
just
the
said to
employees that we
you,
pay. Hold
I
on.
just said to you, if I give you the authority to go out there and basically get the money, and you want to give your people $5 more an hour, why would you not want to do that?
Well, I can't speak for him, but that $90,000, when it comes to discretionary spending, my discretionary spending is really in operations and equipment. Everything else is passed through or subscription based. I don't have a lot of room for discretionary spending. CSI is going up $30,000. That eats a third of the cut that was made last year. The shelter is gonna go up again. This is all pass through. And that's ran through my department, and I have no control over that, none. And so when you cut the budget $90,000, that's going to affect operations and equipment only because I can't put it anywhere else.
I'm interested, Matt Amber, are we excessive? Or are we wasteful with anything that we typically, where we're at in this last budget? I honestly can sit here and say, I can't see anywhere where any of us are wasteful. To Michelle, to Brandon, I mean, all of us, we're as lean to me as we can operate without losing services. I mean, that's where we're getting to.
That's right.
We have been talking about a lot of different things over this last month. In fact, the mayor sent out a lot of information. And we have gone through that information. Council members have came in, gone through that information, one by one, talked to the mayor about it, about possible cuts. And tonight you see the couple areas that we can possibly cut. You can cut ULCT. I don't know of a city that doesn't do it. You can cut Ogden Weaver Chamber of Commerce. You know, every mayor is there. Like, there is not a whole lot of money. We do have a lot of money that we spend in the city. There's like hardly any discretionary funds. Just like Chief Gwen was talking, it's that way throughout every single department. When Chief Gwen's department is saying $6.5 million, the majority of that's wages. So when Michelle's looking at her budget, it doesn't really, I wouldn't call it discretion when she's having to buy chemicals to open a pool. She doesn't have a choice but to buy those chemicals. To say that she has discretion of whether she puts 3 fertilizer applications down versus 2, I wouldn't say is a real good choice, but that's the choice that she has, that's what she had to cut last year. Now, when we're talking about the city manager having to cut all these things, it's only because I have to balance the budget by statute. I have a timeline. It's not that I like to go through the departments and cut these things. It's because I have to. It's a real crappy job, to tell you the truth. But we have to maintain this as a city, and the only way we're going to do it, where I see all these conversations going around, and the only way we're going to do it is a team. We can't do it by ourselves. There's a happy medium in all things. And to say that the public safety hasn't been suffering, or Michelle hasn't been suffering, I think when I come here as a city, the only reason why I stay is because I like it. Not because it's so fun.
But with your comment, Matt, what you're saying is, Randy and Diane, it's not the right way to move by basically transferring that responsibility. Allow it to stay at the city manager level so that he can manage the process better, where you can balance it.
Yes.
So what I hear you saying, and maybe what I hear you as director saying, you would prefer the city council and or the manager to say, okay, one person gone from every department and we're picking it, as opposed to you knowing what happens inside. That's what I hear you saying, right? I mean, cause I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me.
I'll chime in because their budgets are a lot more employee heavy than mine, obviously, so they have a lot more money, but me being personally, I would sooner have the money and me make the decision, like you said, if I want to get rid of an employee to bring my wages up. But yeah, I do think that we do have to have the COLA merits for across all my employees. And, you know, like we've talked about before, is we do need to do a salary survey to get them even in the ballpark, because I don't think the COLAs or the merits are gonna even put us in the ballpark. But yes, I would sooner make the decision. I would rather not Matt come down and say, okay, you're losing 2. And you know what I mean? Like, I think me as a department head knows where I can and can't cut to still provide the services that we need to provide.
And then, nothing against Matt, but I do feel like I know my department a lot better than Matt.
But there's reluctancy because if they don't have the money, like the chiefs are saying, they don't have the money to operate. I think Brandon has the luxury in the utility enterprise funds because he's not subject to everything else. But the general fund is super, super tight. And if you look through the funds, there's not a whole lot of funds that go around. And I think it's really, it's fascinating to me of how we've gone through this process this whole last month. To say that we had a 35-page document and now we're only talking about a few things, because there's not money to cut. We cut that last year. So we have a choice. What city do we want? Do we raise the taxes? Because I feel for you guys. It's not fun to say that I'm a city council member that raised your taxes 50%. I think of that.
So do I.
It's not fun, I get it. But when you look at the last 20 years here, how much have we raised taxes? Only a handful of times. And then I would say almost every comment that we get when we have that city council meeting to raise taxes, almost every comment is that you have gotten those tax increases because of inflation. But we haven't. So there's a huge misconception by the general public. When you're talking about property taxes, and I don't want to be poking at the schools, but 60% of it goes to there. We're the third person on the list. The county gets more money than us. It's also a shame to say that the average homeowner here in Roy, the average value of their home is lower than other places. So when you're talking about a property tax rate that we always like to weigh ourselves against, people up in North Ogden, when the average value is higher and they have the same property tax or the same property rate that we do, they get double the money that we do. I can tell you that the fire chief's truck is not going to be half the money because we get half the rate. But when you look at like West Haven, I don't want to be poking at these people, but when you look at West Haven and you say the average cost of their houses out there and you take that fire district, they're probably paying more for that service than we are because the average house price here in Roy is lower. But it's taking the same amount of money to operate. And it's frustrating for the chiefs because it always goes back to those employees. Because we try to conserve so much and it's always on the back of the employees.
So I kind of get the impression that this is kind of like a blame thing. So we just want, who do we want to blame? So we don't want to, instead of thinking about in a positive way, like we'd like to empower you and as directors, we're thinking of it as, well, we don't want to get the blame for it. And so it's better to have Matt get the blame or someone else. I mean, that's what it's starting to boil down to instead of anything, it's kind of the positive look versus the negative look. And I think when we work towards something on a positive end, you end up with a better result. You end up with a better team. You end up with a better accomplishment. And it's not that you don't think of those pitfalls. You don't think of those unintended consequences because they need to be there. But that's where the team approach comes in. It's not, okay, we're gonna give it, I don't know why I'm looking at you all the time, but okay, we're gonna give you $6.5 million. If you mess it up, we're blaming you. Well, I don't know. That doesn't seem like the right way to approach it.
But here's, Diane, I agree, I understand your point. What I'm saying to you is I'm gonna speak for me in my experience. I had people who were working for me that was managing their programs a heck of a lot more money and a lot more responsibility than anyone in this room. And they got paid a whole lot less than you're getting paid. In my mind's eye is, you want to make an effective leader? You take that budget. You manage that budget. If these department heads simply says, you give me my budget and let me decide whether or not I'm going to hire, fire, move, buy, whatever, set it aside, you get enough money, chief, okay? You'll be a better manager. I'm just wondering what the resource is going to be to allow that to happen. And the reason why I brought that up, because you put it on the table and Randy talked to that. And when you get two of you, all it takes is an and or a sulfate that says, man, I like this idea. And now that becomes the decision from this council. 3 votes. Matt says not a good decision. There are some weaknesses in this. But if you want to pursue this conversation, then let's flush this out. And we can do that over the next couple of weeks. But before we get too far, we got 2 other council members that need to talk.
Yeah.
Sophie needs to basically talk about property taxes. And Brian, you need to talk about cut expenses. So Sophie, let's go ahead and hear what you have to say.
So digging into my assignment, ensuring fiscal stability and fair employee compensation. The general fund must generate an additional $750,000 in the fund balance to meet the fiscal year 2026 COLA merit increase. Without addressing this shortfall, employee compensation will suffer, potentially affecting the morale and the retention. Like Randy was saying, there's only two ways to get our revenue. And so that's where this comes into play, why a property tax increase. It's a stable revenue source. Property taxes provide a predictable and steady revenue stream. After just listening to all of this, we need to find that steady stream where it's not unpredictable every single year. As property tax increase can directly generate the necessary funds, ensure fiscal stability for future operational costs and employee benefits. It supports the essential city operations and services, and it promotes sustainable budgeting and strengthens overall financial management. We need to take the necessary measures to ensure fair employee compensation. Investing in our employees is investing in our city, and that's where we need to look at. I acknowledge that while increasing property tax is one option, the council should consider many revenue or additional combination of revenues. Expense reductions, like Diane said, we need to find the balance. And after I got totals from Amber, it's not a matter of 9–10%. You're looking at 15% just to get the 750,000. So take out everything that they lost last year, everything you're gonna ask them to decrease this year. You're well over 15–18%. Like, if not 20. I asked her to actually get me a 20%. So 15% is 750,000. Rough. 18% is 905. And 25% increase is 1,200,000. Like, so, I don't know.
So Sophie,
I totally respect your conversation and starting this sooner, but I don't know that we have exact totals yet to even start calculating, like Amber has told, like, I don't think we're even there yet. So to have these conversations and to throw stuff out, I agree, like, I respect the conversation, but I think it's,
We have to get all their budgets back
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
To know for sure.
okay,
We know it's not gonna be cheap, but.
she said 25% will get 1.2 million. Is that what I heard?
Yep.
$750,000? And the
It's
chief says I
50.
need the 621,000 or a portion of 621,000 put back in. Can't survive without bullets, can't survive without fertilizer.
Yeah.
So we're really close to 1.5, 1.6 mil? Is that a fair statement?
So if we did 25% tax increase, how much is that
It's more-
property owners?
1.2, about, that's where my $100 of property comes from at 12,000 households
$100
a year,
a year.
a year, 27 cents a day. Or the resident has to go out and spend $2,500 more a year to make up the equivalent.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that you will
That's
not
not
see
guaranteed,
that
yeah.
increase.
Correct.
You only see 50% of the sales tax with.
That's based upon, I actually backed into that. That is at $2,500 is 50% of the tax rate.
But that's not
well,
guaranteed to Roy City.
Correct. But that's the thing is, that's what they would have to go through and consume in sales tax revenue generating services or purchases. And again, that's based on a 6% tax rate or sales tax rate, which I know it's somewhere in the middle amongst everything. But that's what the average household would have to go through and spend for us to generate the equivalent of that 1.2 million.
Well, we are gonna have like few businesses come into Roy and townhomes and, I mean, and I've talked to the mayor of Hooper and she said, there's no way they're probably gonna put a Smith's down there. Was just last weekend. She's
Not
getting
true,
too
too.
much pushback on it.
But if we don't, then the percentage gets worse.
But
Right.
Right.
we
Right,
get
right.
some more money in tax revenue and
I think you,
Like,
we're,
not all doom and gloom.
right. Well, and that's the thing is, if we go back to our bellwether of 18%, what we hold in reserve, we do have the, the sale of that real property that we're gonna be doing. So we can use some of that money. Again, I would argue if we were going to set, the watermark for, the fund balance at 18%. And, because again, that's what we've already got on the books. And we can draw down against some of that. We can offset a little bit of the cost that way with the sale of the property, but that's just a one-time. We're going to have to address that in years over the horizon. Yeah.
But what I'm hearing you say is you would consider, at least in part, you would consider using fund balance to solve this problem.
Correct. As long as, again, we already put out the rules that we're only going to allow 18%. So if we're over that threshold, then we pull out and offset.
So one of the concerns is, using that money, of course, that's gonna be a longevity type of bill, but, so I think that's why I'm thinking we need to be planning ahead. We're talking about planning ahead, and we've got to get some of these budgets back in the system. So that's where I think using that money, realizing the money's all out there. If you think of it that way,
Your
a
maintenance funds, yeah.
one-time,
Yeah.
a one-time sale of property, putting it towards some of these maintenance funds that we need to start
Sure.
getting back going. It seems to be a little cleaner cut across possibly,
Right.
but I do agree that, some of that's keeping that 18% and then utilize that.
No, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, talk to us about cut expenses.
Okay. I drew the short straw, was given the assignment of eliminating or cutting 750,000 off of these discussion pillars. But the truth of the matter is that even if we cut every single thing on my sheet, it only comes to about 476,000. So I'm still 300,000 short on this piece of paper. So I'm telling you that so you don't think there's no way, Brian, it won't work, because I know it won't work. I know it won't work, but it's here to help, and this is my assignment. Anyway, the first thing that's listed on this is the miscellaneous services for the police. Found out what that was. That's the bailiffs, the 2 court bailiffs that we approved. And so there is no way that we can cut that, because of the reason being, it allows us to have additional law enforcement out on the street. Okay, so that one's out. And I figured that it help make the chief happy too. Other things that I came across is the council contingency fund. Diane had mentioned it. It's at 23,400. And I think not only could we cut it in half, but I think we could cut it by 2/3. I really do. It's money that we give out at $100 at a time to groups that come before us. Let's save that money. Go, if we put that money with the money they've got over in community development, we could hire somebody. So anyway, the other thing that I came across was the goods that are sold, the concession goods that are sold at the complex and the aquatic center, we probably should upgrade those costs at 175% of cost. Just a suggestion, just because, okay.
Costs now, for sure.
Thank you. And then, I also looked at, the Utah League of Cities and Towns, a lot of fun. St. George weather's great, but we're spending too much money sending the council to that event. If we're gonna be a part of that, then we need to send 1 or 2 people, and those 1 or 2 people bring back to the rest of the council what they learned, what was new, because I've been down there 3 or 4 times, and first time, great information. Second time, it was okay. Third time, not so good. And fourth time is, where's the golf course? So I'm just saying, we need to cut that out. If that's a council decision, I think we ought to consider that. The other thing that I thought of that might save our police a little bit of money. About a month and a half ago, we wanted to move the Roy Day Super Saturday events up to a 7 p.m. closure. I personally think that we'd save money both in Parks and Rec and with the police if we moved that up closer to 4:30 at the end of the car show. We allowed the car show, when it closed, we closed, period. Save you guys a little bit of consternation with having to chase juveniles as well, because they generally start accumulating around 5 o'clock. Just thinking out of the box. I'm sorry I'm purple, but that's the assignment they gave me. The other things, the Christmas bonus. I hate to be Scrooge McDuck, but man, do we need it where it's at? I mean, that's a lot of money. It amounts to, let's see, well, the employee of the month amounts to about 33,000, and the
300 or
3,300?
or 33.
Yeah, because I want to be employee of the month. You get that much.
No. It totals month after month, 33,000, unless I've been given wrong figures.
No, the $33,000 is that Christmas bonus.
That's the
The
bonus.
bonus, and then the employee of the month.
This comes through HR, right?
Oh, so that's so there's a longevity bonus, so when you get the
Okay,
10 years, you get $100, yes.
okay.
And that's, I think, $1,000, $2,000 a year, yeah.
Well, all I know is.
The big portion in that account is the Christmas funds.
Okay. And again, I know it's nice, it shows appreciation, but man, that's a lot of appreciation. I'd rather have donuts. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got. I didn't get a very large list. It's probably because I'm such an anti-tax guy. So,
Let me ask a question on that. One of the things, Brandon, was the property we're leasing from the railroad. If you remember, and I keep a report, so I apologize. You weren't in charge, but it's certainly an interesting conversation. We went up there purposely in 2018. Pulse and I went with Senator Buxton down to this Capitol and went into the Division of Facility Construction and Management Office. They were putting the old Moita on the auction block. Interesting enough, they wanted, I think the number they wanted was $870,000 for that facility. And so we went down there under the premise that says, in fact, we thought we had 4 people who were bidding on that. And so we're really concerned that we would in fact put a bid in there that would have been so under budgeted that we wouldn't do it. But we made an agreement within the city, and that was back in 2018, that what we'll do is if we can get that building and you would knock it down, then the request would be is to cancel that lease. Okay, that was the agreement. Remember it?
Yeah.
Okay. Olson, the city manager at the time, went down there and he sat in that office until 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, he had 2 bids that he walked in there with, and the bids were that we will buy it for $60,000, if I remember the number. So here was an $870,000 facility with 2.3 acres, and we were going to buy it for $60,000. Our premise was strip it, you got a few things out of it, boiler, a few other things, and we were going to knock it down. But to recoup that, we weren't going to pay that lease price. That was the plan, okay? That was in 2018. We bought the land, built the building. You started the process to tear that down. It wasn't until the letter went out in January 25th of 2022. So this is 4 years after we had that agreement we're going to do. In fact, that we told the UP, Union Pacific, we weren't going to lease that property anymore. And the last report I think, Matt, you shared with you was we still haven't got, we're still not out of that lease.
We haven't been paying the lease, but we're still not technically out of the lease.
Right. Okay. How many years?
The railroad works on their own time.
Yeah. So, yeah, right now at the railroad, what we have to do is we have to get the property all tested to make sure there's no contamination. We're working through that right now. Before they'll.
Yes.
But we haven't paid it for 3 years, I believe.
Yeah, it's been 3 years since they've even had communication with us. For the first year, we sent them a letter. The next year, they sent us the bill. We sent them a letter saying, we canceled this last year. Same thing a couple of years in a row. And then just as of 2-3 months ago, they contacted Brandon and said, according to the lease, you have to do ground testing. So we still haven't been paying it, but.
No,
they're still saying,
but the piece of the conversation is, it's in the budget. And anytime you put something on the expense column, there has to be a matching, okay, revenue column.
that is correct.
And the issue is that we're not paying it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
And yet it's in the budget.
And how much was it a month you were supposed to be paying?
Just
I believe
over
it's split between 3, about what, 12 or 13,000, I believe, and 2 of them come out of enterprise funds, so just the one is general out of the street department.
$9,500, I think.
Street department.
If I remember correctly.
93.
But if we agreed we're not going to pay it, but you may have to pay $20,000 to do the testing of the ground. Let me ask you this, Matt, Brody, Brandon. If that had weeds 6 feet tall, could you go to UP and tell them to clear it?
That's what we've done with the other parcel that's further to the north, is we've sent our people after them to maintain it, and so we've worked out our agreement. We do keep our dumpsters and stuff on that portion. So yes, that is our end game, but
Okay.
until.
This may seem a little foolish, but the issue would be is if we're talking about taking away all the city councils and volunteer to do this, so we get no revenue, no income from this job. If we're that deep into this conversation, it certainly would suggest is that we could take some of this low-hanging fruit and just simply don't add it to the budget. And if it's not in the budget, then you don't have to expect to find a way to put revenue against it. And we can start to whittle this thing down to a point where maybe we can achieve at least some type of a compromise that we can basically agree to, without basically going what appears to be either cutting services or raising our property tax, okay, through the roof. Somewhere in the middle of all this is going to have to be a requirement. We comfortable we can take that out of the budget?
I would imagine we could get the testing done and hopefully, when the railroad lets us out of it, but yeah, I would
So what are
imagine
they
just
gonna
be
do with it
covered in
once
that
you test it?
enterprise funds as well, right? If we did have any further expense.
Provide that.
Huh?
You have to provide that.
And so is it the property behind the sheds there? Or-
Yeah, so right behind Public Works, you'll see that cement wall. It's basically everything to the east of there.
Up to the train shed.
Yeah, to
with
the
fence.
fence line.
So why would there be any chemicals in that? Cause it's just where,
They stored stuff on it years ago. Yeah.
like oil drips and crap. like
Yeah,
that?
so I mean, that's kind of what sparked it is the, people that maintain that tower, they had a lift parked on the dirt there. And they noticed an oil spot, brother, so. But then I'm sure it's probably mandatory with their leases. I'm sure that's what the railroad requires to get out of a lease.
And how big of a piece of property is it?
I believe it's probably 2 acres. I don't know.
Oh, land, but everything above the retention wall.
It costs that much to have people go around and dig up dirt and.
Oh, yeah, you
test
wouldn't
it?
believe what we pay. They wanted 27,000 to appraise a piece of property up on Hillville.
When we start talking about where to cut, and key would be as we look for the low hanging fruit that makes sense and we cut.
Mhm.
And that way we don't have to raise the revenue to compensate what's not being used or what's needed. This is hard conversation, which is the reason why you get into the bowels of the business that simply says what makes sense. And I think you guys have done a pretty good job doing that. Okay, Matt, unless I hear anything, here's what I think we gotta walk away here. I'm sensing the council's position would be is we don't know enough to be able to make any strong recommendations one way or another, but at least unless if I see 3 head nods, you'll consider a property tax in this next budget cycle. Is that a fair statement?
I think given, there's like no question in my mind that we're not gonna be doing that. So it just comes down to what that rate is.
Are you interested on the other side of the coin, suggesting is that we need to cut services?
I would be more akin to cutting services than I would headcount. That's just being brutally honest.
There's got to be a correlation. Roughly around 72% of the entire general fund budget is paying for salaries.
I would much prefer raise property taxes and keep our current staffing levels. Cause right now they're already to the bone. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. We cannot, in good conscience, ask any of our department heads to turn around and cut headcount without having, I mean, our constituents already come to us and complain how crappy the city looks. It's only going to get exacerbated if we go through and cut additional staffing. That's just reading the forest from the trees.
So what does that mean? You're not willing to cut services or you're willing to?
No, I'm willing to cut services, but I'm not willing to cut headcount.
Like what?
Well, Diane went through
Correct.
many of them,
Well, I know,
many of them.
but
But that's the, yeah, there's even to like Brian's point, he went through and he was only able to find 476,000. So it would be, okay, are there some in there that we could actually cut? Should we like not do ULCT? Should we look at cutting back? Again, I'm not on the city council to make money. So,
No, I don't think any of us are,
right, 100%.
but I'd hate to see us become. And I explained this to Diane last
Good
night,
points. Yep.
but I'd hate to see the council have to be a volunteer board and us rely on them staying stationary
Sure.
for 4 years without creating a turnstile effect, meaning
Yeah.
I'm a volunteer, I'm out of here.
Full disclosure, when I ran, I didn't know that I would get paid. It wasn't until I had a conversation with
I'm
With
the
Matt.
same way. I didn't know neither.
yeah, I was doing it out of a civic duty.
But like Matt
I
always
agree.
says, we're one of the lower paid
Oh.
councils. And I don't think we should cut, I wish we would open the complex, the aquatic center on Sunday. I think it would, give us more revenue because more people
Yeah.
would come on Sunday. I like that the Boweries, we shouldn't, only 6 people used it. And those 6 people that used it, the people they brought might have said that was a great place, so their friends might have used it. Just like going to the aquatic center, we get a punch pass, but then we bring a lot of family members that don't have a punch pass, they're having to pay. I might get in free, but they have to pay, and then I always have to buy my grandkids ice cream, so don't raise it too high. And so everything that we do makes Roy City what it is and why people want to come to us, because of our aquatic center and our complex and our good roads and our good police department, our good fire department. And we want to still keep it at the best and not cut it. And we want to have good morale. We don't want to take away all the little perks that make it a good place to work and to spend money. I think that, more things are gonna come to Roy. The country's in a bad place right now, so I don't know if interest rates are gonna go down, and hopefully Woodbury, one day we'll start to build something. But I don't think we should take away all these little things that make Roy City what it is. That's just,
What are you willing to pay for that land?
yes. And my family members and my brothers that live here, they live here for a reason, and
But there's some that can't pay for it.
well,
And
if it's only
I'm gonna
$14,
be-
$15 a month,
$100
I
a
mean,
year.
$100 a year.
27
mean,
cents a day.
Everybody that I've talked to would rather pay that and make sure that when they call the police and they call the fire and they have no potholes in their roads, that they're willing to pay that.
100%.
Yes.
Go ahead.
When you raise the taxes on the people that
I
you're
know.
talking about,
No,
okay? That's great, but in turn, what about the businesses that are here that are gonna pay that at 100%? And why would we force or have a business close because of it? You know what? I think there's a way that we can take all those pillars, all 5, and make it work, so we're not having to have a 25% tax increase.
well, I don't want a 25% tax increase.
Oh, you're gonna get it.
So,
It's coming.
but
Oh,
I'm just, we are looking at a 20% minimum. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I will say this now, if it costs me, because I'm gonna go up for reelection. If our only lever over the next 3 to 5 years is we are going to see double-digit property tax increases in order for us to keep our staff. Period.
And you're basically, your position would be, that's okay.
Yes, yes. Because if not, going back to what I was framing the entire time, a household has to spend $2,500 or we have to take $100 out of their back pocket. Most households don't have that. Again, going back to what you're talking about, Brian, the services that we need to take and be able to provide to our constituents, it's cheaper for us to increase their property taxes than it is for them to go out and spend the money or us to get the revenue to come into the city.
you know what? I'm gonna fight all day for this.
I know.
Your teeter-totter is out of balance when we have raised taxes already over 20%
Correct.
on the people.
Yep.
This is another addition. Soon, we're gonna be at 100% increase next year at this rate.
That is how the economy works. Things continually go up in cost. And that's the thing is the city's costs also go up.
Yeah, but I think, here's what I think we agreed to. We agreed to have a modest property tax increase. And Brody, you and I had a conversation. We're willing to, and I'm gonna ask you, council, to consider this. Would you consider an ordinance that puts a truth and taxation on any city council in Roy City that basically says you'll consider it?
Yes, 100%. Every year, doesn't matter, even if we set the tax rate at 0. Again, just to put it, again,
Why grease the rails?
because it's part of the process.
And I understand the process. I mean, I covered city councils for 30 years. But I'm telling you, this kind of increasing property taxes, it is going the wrong way. You ought to live around the people I live around. And I know everybody here is saying, hey, so what? You're on a fixed income. No, property tax really doesn't even impact me because I've got somebody else paying for my home. But the bottom line is it does impact the people I live around. And these are the very people that we knocked on their doors and told them, what would you like to be represented? I believe that I'll have to approve a tax increase. Here are my words. I will approve a tax increase, but at 25%,
Again, we're
too much.
Here's the thing. We go in this cycle. In fact, you can, if history is any indicator of what we have had to do, you were on the council, were we on the council or I can't remember when they did the 36% property tax increase? Yeah, no, I'm pointing at mayors.
No.
Yeah. And that's the thing is we go in these cycles where we have to have a catch-up year. And then I think we can get back to modest increases over the course of the horizon. This is going to have to be our catch-up year to right the ship, to right the teeter-totter, as you just said to me. Because that's the economic conditions that we're up against is we either, it's tough. It's not gonna be a fun year.
Okay, well, let's wait until
Yeah.
we get all of this.
Yeah.
Let's,
What about the services side of this? And then we'll break. Is the council would be willing to consider cutting services? We certainly have identified some areas that we believe we can make cuts. Are you willing to cut services?
There weren't a lot of them, but there are a few. I absolutely think that we need to try to do that. And Mayor, you're the only one that knows if Chamber of Commerce is important enough because I don't, or I don't know if the other people do. Is Chamber of Commerce, does it provide a value?
To the extent in terms of what we're paying for, we could certainly argue that. I think my comment was more along the lines of cutting city services. What are we saying we're no longer willing to do? Because if the only alternative in this conversation is property tax, then Matt has clear direction what to do. Let the numbers come in, whatever the balance is going to be, raise the property tax to that level, and that's what he comes to the city council.
so are those services that you're talking about even enough to not raise the property tax?
Well, not,
The service.
Oh, no.
no, the
No.
issues, the
No,
The very
issues.
ones I talked about were very
Yeah.
small. They came up to about $64,000.
Yeah, these are minor. Okay.
But the 64,000, again, I'm gonna pick on you, Brody, but you have the part-time position. We've got whatever, go ahead.
And so I'll just say, you talked about my position a lot. Like, that is what you're talking about. Like, Brian says he doesn't want to do taxes. That's fine. We use my job as an example. We wanted, because we hear residents all the time, my neighbor's yard is ugly, you guys are terrible, you don't do anything. Right? From April until July, I hear that 10 to 15 times a week. Okay? So we say, if we want to be more proactive, we need to, quite frankly, the numbers suggest we could have 4 full-time code enforcement officers. We bring that to council, they get allotted a budget for a part-time that's approved. It's not filled because the wage is so low. We had 2 applicants, one was illiterate, and the other person only told me they're applying so that they can go after their neighbor because they don't like him. So that's what we got. So you say, let's cut services, that's fine. That's what you're cutting. You're cutting a job, you're cutting a person, you're cutting something that won't happen for the residents. So if we want to talk services, that's fine. What should we as staff not do anymore? And who or what positions do we not want to fund? Please tell me.
That's the only one I can think of. Cause like you said, nobody applies for it, and I think that Brock is doing a great job.
So that's still, it's good, that's fine, and that's what we have to do. Come April, when everyone's mad at us, that's the answer.
Okay, so cut it quick, so it's gone, so then when they start complaining.
I like that.
It's bad.
Well,
But when it comes down to it, we went through line by line, all the possible services we could cut. And we did not, those of us that talked about, we didn't come up with any services that that were material of any amount
That's
to
what,
cut.
when we say cut services, what we're talking about is what employees or what things does the city provide that we no longer want to provide it?
That's the only one I can think of. That,
And, you
That
know,
doesn't take us too far.
so, I mean, if you want to talk about that, we would need direction from council. What jobs, what employees should we cut?
And I'll go on the record, I'm not looking to cut any employees, part-time, full-time, we're already too thin.
like Michelle, they run off part-time employees.
Yeah.
Like Travis told me, he said that we didn't have our part-time employees, plus it would cost more to pay money for full-time employees overtime to go mow the lawns, and then Brandon says he has them all to fill, you know, the holes in the road, and those are all the part-time people that he uses, so those departments using part-time employees probably the most out of the city. Well, they're the only ones that really use it, is Parks and Rec and Public Works. And you have part-time firemen that come in also, so that help you keep your costs down also. So I can't see cutting any of those.
Okay. You have an opportunity to make the decision when you get the final numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any reason for us to have any more meetings like this, probably until sometime as we closer to the date we have to approve. I sense the council has agreed that we'll have a truth and taxation in August. Once we get the numbers hard down, we'll basically come up with a plan. Go with what you heard, Matt, okay? The idea about distributing monies to the department heads, I think was a concept, but I'm not sure it gaining traction other than a good conversation. So I think we stay status quo unless the councils come to you and basically suggest, I want to go ahead and move forward on that.
Can I stop right there? Can I ask Matt to take a moment to think about that concept and see if with time that is a feasible option or if it really isn't? Because I do think that could still be part of the solution, and something longevity. So if that's all right, he can at
Well, I
least,
think, okay, I mean, we should.
check into
we
that.
should basically look at all sides of it.
Look
I
at
just-
everything, so.
I'm just looking at trying to find out how you're going to basically cut. Well,
Mayor, if I can jump in real quick, just for some clarification, and I'm the last one that wants to extend a meeting, so my apologies. But there was some talk about an ordinance to say we go through the truth and taxation process. That doesn't guarantee an increase or a decrease, but that by ordinance, we require that as part of the budgetary process. I know the mayor and I talked to Randy. Is there anyone else that would like us to work on that and let you guys see what that would see? So
Whether
we,
we ever raise the taxes or not, I just think that it's just something that needs to be done.
yeah, and we'll get into that later, but before we really spent time working on it, I wanted to make sure that was something we wanted to see.
anything else, council?
No.
Okay, need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Randy,
The second.
Sophie? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
right?
Any opposed, say nay.
Get some of the Wilson bread, it's fantastic.
With the paper.
It was a little crispy, was a little crispy, I will,